Colonel Potter, sir. Corporal Klinger. I'm Section 8, head to toe.
For 11 seasons, from 1972 to 1983, MASH was one of the most watched programs on American television. It made us laugh, it made us cry, and it made us care deeply about a group of fictional doctors and nurses stuck in a war none of them asked to be part of. The show ended over 40 years ago, and time has been doing what time always does. So today, we're looking at the MASH cast members. Who's still alive in 2026? The show that refused to be just a show. Before we get into the cast, it's worth remembering what MASH actually was, because it was unlike anything else on television at the time. It premiered on CBS on September 17, 1972, a war comedy set in the Korean War, but filmed squarely in the shadow of Vietnam. American troops were still in Southeast Asia when the show debuted. The country was exhausted, divided, and looking for ways to process what a decade of war had done to it. MASH gave people a way to do that, wrapped in a comedy that was actually funny, which made the harder moments land even harder. The 4077th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital was the setting, and the show followed the doctors, nurses, and support staff who kept it running. People who cracked jokes between surgeries not because they were callous, but because humor was the only thing standing between them and a complete breakdown. The show understood something that a lot of television didn't, that the funniest people are often the ones closest to the edge. Hawkeye Pierce wasn't joking because the war was easy. He was joking because it was impossible. The show was adapted from a 1970 Robert Altman film, which itself was based on Richard Hooker's 1968 novel about army surgeons in Korea, but the television version became something entirely its own. Developer Larry Gelbart turned what had been a fairly dark satire into something more layered, a show that could spend half an episode in slapstick comedy and the other half watching a character quietly fall apart under the weight of what they were doing. That tonal range is what kept it on the air for 11 years. Over its run, the show cycled through cast members, some leaving by choice, some written out in ways that genuinely shocked viewers. The famous example is Colonel Henry Blake. When McLean Stevenson decided to leave, the writers killed the character off in the season 3 finale by having his plane shot down over the Sea of Japan on his way home. The cast wasn't told in advance. They filmed the scene where Radar reads the news aloud in the operating room in a single take, because one take was all they had in them. Audiences were stunned. Letters poured in. It was the moment everyone understood that this show was willing to go somewhere most television wouldn't. It won 14 Emmy Awards from over 100 nominations across its run, and when it finally ended on February 28, 1983, with the 2.5-hour finale, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen, a record-breaking 121.6 million Americans tuned in, a number that still stands as the most watched television series finale in American history, more than 4 decades later. That's the show we're talking about. Those are the people we're checking in on. The main cast, a quick roll call. Over 11 seasons, MASH had 11 regular cast members in various combinations. The original lineup in 1972 included Alan Alda as Captain Hawkeye Pierce, Wayne Rogers as Captain Trapper John McIntyre, McLean Stevenson as Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake, Loretta Swit as Major Margaret Hotlips, Houlihan, Larry Linville as Major Frank Burns, Gary Berghoff as Corporal Radar O'Reilly, Jamie Farr as Corporal Maxwell Klinger, and William Christopher as Father Francis Mulcahy. Over the years, Rogers and Stevenson departed after season 3 and were replaced by Mike Farrell as Captain B.J. Honeycutt and Harry Morgan as Colonel Sherman T. Potter. After season 5, Linville left and David Ogden Stiers came in as Major Charles Emerson Winchester III. Berghoff left after season 8. What's striking about that lineup, looking back now, is how much turnover the show absorbed without losing its identity. Most ensemble shows don't survive the departure of 1 or 2 main characters. MASH lost 3 of its original 8 leads in the first 5 seasons and kept getting better. It replaced them with actors who understood that they weren't being asked to fill a void. They were being asked to become something new inside a story that was already running. That takes a specific kind of trust between actors, writers, and an audience that had already decided to stay. The show's production location was also part of its identity in ways people don't always think about. It was filmed at Malibu Creek State Park in the Santa Monica Mountains outside Los Angeles, the same dusty hills, the same creek bed, the same mountains standing in for Korea across all 11 years. The actual landscape never changed. The people who walked through it did. Of those 11 main cast members, as of 2026, only 4 are still alive. Let that land for a moment. Those we've lost. McLean Stevenson, Colonel Henry Blake. McLean Stevenson played the warm, sometimes bumbling commanding officer Colonel Henry Blake for the show's first 3 seasons, and he was the first of the main cast to go, not just on the show, but in real life. Colonel Blake was the kind of boss everyone wishes they had. Fundamentally decent, not terribly organized, more interested in being a good man than being a correct one. He fished. He missed his family back in Bloomington, Illinois. He let Hawkeye and Trapper get away with things a stricter commanding officer never would have, and audiences loved him for it. Stevenson left MASH voluntarily after season 3, convinced he could build a bigger career as a solo television personality. He wanted to be a star in his own right, not a supporting player in someone else's ensemble. It was an understandable ambition. It didn't quite work out that way. He hosted variety programs, starred in short-lived sitcoms, and made appearances across the television landscape of the late 1970s and 1980s, but none of it landed with the same warmth. The audience affection he'd earned as Henry Blake didn't transfer the way he'd hoped. He is, to this day, something of a cautionary figure in television history, the actor who left the best thing he ever had. Stevenson died on February 15, 1996, at Encino Tarzana Regional Medical Center in California, following a heart attack while recovering from surgery. He was 68 years old. His death was the first among the main cast, and it hit fans hard, a reminder that the people they'd laughed with every week on television were, like everyone else, mortal. Larry Linville, Major Frank Burns. If McLean Stevenson's Colonel Blake was the lovable bumbler you felt bad for, Larry Linville's Major Frank Burns was the one you were actively rooting against. Linville played the pompous, cowardly, rules-obsessed Frank Burns for 5 seasons, and he did it so convincingly that audiences genuinely disliked the man on a weekly basis. Frank was petty, hypocritical, and deeply insecure, a man who hid behind rank and regulation because he knew he couldn't back it up with anything else. That kind of performance is harder than it looks. It takes real craft to be that reliably unlikable without tipping into cartoon territory. Linville left the show after season 5, feeling that the character had been taken as far as he could go, and looking back, he wasn't wrong. Frank Burns had been the butt of every practical joke, publicly humiliated in every episode for 5 years, and there was genuinely nowhere left for him to go except more of the same. The producers replaced the character with David Ogden Steyer's Winchester, who was a fundamentally different kind of antagonist. After MASH, Linville worked steadily in theater and television, and by several accounts genuinely enjoyed being free from a character he'd played so thoroughly that it had started to feel like a cage. He was diagnosed with cancer in the late 1990s and had part of his lung removed in 1998. His health declined from there. Larry Linville died on April 10, 2000 at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in New York City. He was 60 years old, the youngest of the main cast to die. He'd been in the public eye just enough in his final years that fans knew he was ill, but the news of his passing still arrived with the particular sadness of someone gone too soon. He's been gone for over a quarter century now, and there are MASH fans who still miss the specific irritation of watching Frank Burns strut around the 4077th. Harry Morgan, Colonel Sherman T. Potter. Harry Morgan came to MASH in season 4 to fill the impossible void left by McLean Stevenson, and he did it with such quiet authority that within a season, Colonel Potter felt like he'd always been there. Potter was everything Blake wasn't. Steady, experienced, a career soldier who actually knew how an army unit was supposed to function. He was firm when firmness was needed and human when humanity was called for. He could rein in Hawkeye's chaos without breaking it, which was a genuinely difficult trick to pull off week after week. Morgan's performance earned him a Primetime Emmy Award for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series in 1980, and it was thoroughly deserved. What made Colonel Potter particularly resonant was that he was allowed to be complicated. He loved his wife Mildred, whom we never saw but heard about constantly. He painted watercolors. He had seen too much war over too many years to have any illusions left about it. Harry Morgan brought a gravity to those moments that lifted the show whenever it needed lifting. Morgan had a career stretching back to the 1940s in films and television, long before MASH and for years after it. He appeared in After MASH, the 1983 spin-off, and kept working well into old age. At the 1983 press conference following the taping of the final episode, Morgan told reporters, "I don't know if MASH made me a better actor, but I know it made me a better human being." That's a line that stays with you. Harry Morgan died on December 7th, 2011, from pneumonia at his home in Bel Air, California. He was 96 years old, the longest-lived member of the main cast, and by any measure, a life very well lived. Wayne Rogers, Captain Trapper John McIntyre. Wayne Rogers played Trapper John McIntyre, Hawkeye's partner in Surgery and Mischief, for the show's first 3 seasons. He and Alan Alda had a genuine on-screen chemistry. They were two men who thought alike, laughed alike, and faced the same horrors together, and the early years of MASH had a loose, improvisational energy that depended on the two of them bouncing off each other. Together, they were the reckless heart of the 4077th. Then, Rogers left. He had grown frustrated with what he felt was an inequitable contract and the increasingly dominant role Hawkeye was playing in the writer's attention. He departed after season 3, his character quietly written out with a scene where Hawkeye wakes up one morning to find Trapper already gone. No goodbye, no farewell scene, just an empty bunk. It was a jarring way to handle the departure, and it remains one of the more divisive decisions in the show's history. After MASH, Rogers made a deliberate pivot away from acting as the primary focus of his life. He became a successful investment advisor and stock trader, building a financial career with genuine substance behind it. He appeared on financial television, ran his own firm, and by most accounts found real satisfaction in that world. He came back to MASH for the 30th anniversary reunion special in 2002 and appeared relaxed and at peace, a man who had built a full second act. Wayne Rogers died on December 31st, 2015, from complications of pneumonia in Los Angeles. He was 82 years old. The fact that he died on the very last day of the year, the same day, exactly 1 year later, that William Christopher would die, is the kind of coincidence that doesn't feel like coincidence at all. William Christopher, Father Francis Mulcahy. William Christopher played Father Francis Mulcahy for all 11 seasons of MASH, one of only 4 characters to appear throughout the entire run of the show. Father Mulcahy was the camp's chaplain, gentle, genuinely devout, occasionally overwhelmed by the chaos swirling around him, but always present, always trying to help. In a show full of strong, loud personalities, Christopher made the quiet priest its moral anchor. Mulcahy didn't crack the best jokes. He wasn't the most dramatic character, but he was the one who was always there, holding someone's hand, hearing someone's confession, or simply bearing witness to things he couldn't fix. Christopher brought a sincerity to the role that made Father Mulcahy feel real rather than simply functional. He wasn't played for comic relief in the way some supporting characters were. He was played straight, which paradoxically made him funnier in the moments when he was funny, and more affecting in the moments when the show turned serious. After MASH ended, Christopher appeared in After MASH alongside Harry Morgan and Jamie Farr, and continued working steadily in television through the following decades. In 2012, he took on a churchly role again as Father Tobias on the soap opera Days of Our Lives, which ran until his health declined. Christopher's wife, Barbara, spoke publicly about his illness in the months before his death, and the MASH community followed with the mixture of dread and tenderness that comes with watching someone beloved grow ill. William Christopher died on December 31st, 2016, 1 year to the day after Wayne Rogers, from small cell carcinoma. He was 84 years old. The quiet man who played the quiet priest turned out to be, by most accounts of those who knew him, very much like the role he played. David Ogden Stiers, Major Charles Emerson, Winchester III. David Ogden Stiers joined MASH in Season 6, brought in to replace the departing Larry Linville, and the producers made a genuinely bold creative decision. They didn't try to give audiences another Frank Burns. Instead of another incompetent antagonist who existed to be humiliated, they created Major Charles Emerson Winchester III, a brilliant, arrogant, classically trained Boston surgeon who was not merely a foil to Hawkeye and BJ, but a genuine equal. Winchester could match them in the operating room. He could outmaneuver them intellectually. He had taste, breeding, and real skill, and the joke was never simply that he was terrible. It was that he was marooned somewhere that refused to appreciate any of that. Stiers had trained at the Juilliard School, which was exactly the right background for a character defined by his relationship to high culture. The classical music expertise Winchester demonstrated on the show, the moments when Charles sat alone listening to records in the middle of a war or argued passionately about composers, was entirely real. Stiers was a conductor of genuine standing, leading the Newport Symphony Orchestra for years, and the knowledge he brought to those scenes came from somewhere authentic. For his portrayal of Winchester, Stiers received 2 Primetime Emmy nominations. After MASH concluded in 1983, he built a substantial secondary career in voice acting, lending his unmistakable voice to Cogsworth in Disney's Beauty and the Beast in 1991, Governor Ratcliffe and Wiggins in Pocahontas in 1995, and Kamaji in the English-language dub of Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away in 2001, an extraordinary range for one performer, from a Korean War surgical tent to animated Disney villains to a Japanese animated masterpiece. In his later years, Stiers lived quietly in Newport, Oregon, focused on his conducting and his private life. He was, by the accounts of people who worked with him, both deeply private and entirely lovable, the kind of person whose sense of humor surfaced in elaborate practical jokes rather than in obvious performance. MASH writer Ken Levine described him in a blog post as a wonderful, gentle soul and quirky. David Ogden Stiers died on March 3, 2018, from bladder cancer. He was 75 years old. His passing left the later seasons of MASH without their most musically sophisticated member, and the world of voice acting without one of its most distinctive instruments. Loretta Swit, Major Margaret Hot Lips Houlihan. Loretta Swit was, alongside Alan Alda, the true spine of MASH. She appeared in every single episode across all 11 seasons, from the pilot to the finale, and she was one of only 2 actors, Alda being the other, to maintain that perfect attendance record. Her Margaret Houlihan began as a rigid, by-the-book army nurse whose primary function in the early seasons was to be the target of the camp's jokes and pranks. She was uptight, she was in a relationship with the deeply dislikable Frank Burns, and she was called Hot Lips, with a contempt that the show presented as funny. And then something happened. Over the years, through patient, careful, layered work, Swit transformed Margaret Houlihan into one of the most fully realized characters on American television. The journey from the woman who was the butt of everyone's jokes in 1972 to the woman who stood in the finale as a respected head nurse and full human being. That arc is one of the most remarkable character developments of its era. Swit earned 2 Emmy Awards for the performance, in 1980 and 1982, and they were both deserved. Off-screen, Swit spent decades as an active animal rights advocate. She wrote books on needlepoint and watercolor painting. She appeared in a one-woman touring stage production called Eleanor, Her Secret Journey in 2013, playing Eleanor Roosevelt. Her last acting credit was the 2019 film Play the Flute. In January 2024, Swit participated in MASH, the comedy that changed television, the Fox reunion special, and looked well, still sharp, still engaged, clearly moved by the anniversary. It turned out to be one of her last major public appearances. Loretta Swit died on May 30th, 2025, from natural causes. She was 87 years old. Her passing marked the end of the last woman in the MASH main cast, and for many longtime viewers, it felt like the closing of a door that had been slowly swinging shut for years. She had given her best role 11 years, all 251 episodes, and she had made every one of them count. And then there were 4. As of 2026, 4 of the 11 main cast members of MASH are still alive. Here's where each of them stands. Alan Alda, Captain Benjamin Franklin, Hawkeye Pierce. Age 90, born January 28, 1936. There is no MASH without Alan Alda. He played Hawkeye Pierce for all 251 episodes, the only actor to appear in every single one, and he also wrote and directed numerous episodes across the run. In doing so, he created one of the most beloved characters in American television history, and, along the way, shaped the show itself more than almost any other actor has shaped any show. Hawkeye was the center of the 4077's moral universe. Funny, irreverent, stubbornly anti-war, a man who used jokes as a form of armor against the unbearable weight of what he was seeing and doing every single day. Alda brought layers to that character, Genuine intelligence, real grief, dark comedy that most television of the era never attempted. The role earned him 6 Emmy Awards and 6 Golden Globe Awards. And when the series ended, rather than retreating into the comfort of what he'd already accomplished, Alda kept pushing. His post-MASH career is remarkable on its own terms. He earned an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor for his portrayal of Owen Brewster in Martin Scorsese's The Aviator in 2004. He won a Primetime Emmy for his recurring role as Senator Arnold Vinnick on The West Wing. He appeared in 30 Rock, The Blacklist, The Big C, Marriage Story, and Ray Donovan. In 2025, well into his 80s, he took a guest role in Netflix's The Four Seasons, alongside Steve Carell and Tina Fey. The man has never been in any particular hurry to stop. In 2018, Alda publicly disclosed a Parkinson's disease diagnosis that he had privately been managing since 2015. He was characteristically open about it, talking with doctors, scientists, and the public about the realities of living with the disease. By May 2025, he described managing his symptoms as almost a full-time job, but added, and this is so perfectly Hawkeye it almost doesn't seem real, that it keeps me always looking for the funny side. He hosts the podcast Clear Plus Vivid with Alan Alda, devoted to science communication and human connection, and he's been married to Arlene Alda since 1957. The two of them, both well into their late 80s and 90s, are still together, and still, by his account, laughing at each other's jokes. He turned 90 in January 2026. The man who played the most famous fictional doctor in American television history is still here, still curious, still working things out. Not bad for a kid from the Bronx. Gary Berghoff, Corporal Walter Radar O'Reilly. Age 82, born May 24, 1943. Gary Berghoff is the only person who played the same MASH character in both the 1970 Robert Altman film and the television series. That fact alone gives him a unique position in the show's history, but the real reason Berghoff matters is simpler. Radar O'Reilly was one of the most genuinely beloved characters in the run of the show, and Berghoff played him with a gentleness and specificity that made him feel like someone you actually knew. Radar was the boyish, wide-eyed company clerk from Ottumwa, Iowa, the kid who could hear incoming helicopters before anyone else, who carried a teddy bear, who wrote letters home to his mother that were both funny and heartbreaking, and who had an almost preternatural sense of what people needed before they knew they needed it. He was young, and the war was making him older faster than it should have. Berghoff caught that, the constant pull between innocence and experience, and he made it the center of everything Radar did. He was nominated for the Emmy Award 7 consecutive years for the performance and won once in 1977. He left the series after season 8 in the 2-part episode Goodbye Radar, and his departure, Radar climbing alone into a Jeep as a crowd gathers to watch him go, the whole camp turned out to say goodbye to the kid they hadn't always been kind to, is one of the genuinely moving moments in the show's long run. After MASH, Berghoff largely stepped away from the entertainment industry by the 1990s. He became a wildlife painter of some real accomplishment, and he's an inventor with several registered patents in fishing tackle. He has spoken publicly about preferring the quiet life he built after the show to the one he had during it. His last acting credit was in the 2010 film Daniel's Lot, and he seems to have been at peace with that choice ever since. He turned 82 in May 2025, and as of early 2026, he is still with us, the most private of the remaining 4, living quietly and on his own terms. Jamie Farr, Corporal/Sergeant Maxwell Q. Klinger. Age 91, born July 1st, 1934. Jamie Farr is the oldest surviving main cast member of MASH, and the story of how Klinger became a part of the show at all is almost as entertaining as the character himself. Farr was originally hired for a single day's work, 1 episode in season 1, as a bit character meant to appear once and be forgotten. His Corporal Klinger, a Lebanese-American from Toledo, Ohio, who wore women's clothing in a sustained attempt to convince the army he was too crazy to serve and deserved a Section 8 discharge, caught on immediately with audiences. That one-day job turned into 11 seasons. The Klinger character had layers that went beyond the obvious joke. Yes, he wore dresses, but he wore them with commitment and invention, and as the show evolved, Klinger became genuinely funny and surprisingly touching, a man who would do almost anything to get home, and who discovered along the way that he was more capable than he thought. By the later seasons, when Radar left and Klinger took over as company clerk, he had become something fully his own. Farr played all of it, the absurdity, and the heart, with a warmth that made the character impossible to dislike. Farr appeared in all 11 seasons and then starred in After MASH alongside Harry Morgan and William Christopher. He had recurring roles on That 70s Show and Family Guy, appeared in all 3 Cannonball Run films, and made his most recent acting appearance in the 2019 Fox sitcom The Cool Kids. He has a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Toledo has a golf tournament that began as the Jamie Farr Toledo Classic, now the LPGA Dana Open, and Farr still shows up for it annually. In recent years, his health has been a genuine challenge. He has suffered from severe rheumatoid arthritis since the early 1990s and uses a wheelchair to get around. There were health scares in the 2010s that required cardiac treatment, but he has remained warm and engaged with the MASH legacy. The oldest of the survivors, still showing up, still grinning, still very much clinger in the best possible sense. He turned 91 in July 2025, which is a number that deserves a moment of appreciation. Mike Farrell, Captain B.J. Honeycutt. Age 87, born February 6, 1939. Mike Farrell joined MASH in Season 4 to replace the departing Wayne Rogers as Hawkeye's new best friend and surgical partner, and he had the unenviable task of making audiences forget Trapper John McIntyre. He did it, though not by trying to replicate anything Rogers had done. B.J. Honeycutt was a fundamentally different kind of character, quieter than Trapper, more openly emotional, more conflicted about the cost of being away from his wife and daughter back in California. His friendship with Hawkeye had a different texture, less raucous, more genuinely tender. When BJ cried, the show let him cry, and the audience felt it. In the finale, BJ couldn't bring himself to say goodbye to Hawkeye, and it was Farrell's choice not to force it. He left his farewell in the flat stones on a hillside, rocks spelled out to form the word goodbye for Hawkeye to see from the helicopter. It's one of the most remembered images in the show's history, and it was very much the actor understanding his character. After MASH, Farrell stayed active in both acting and advocacy. He appeared in the Providence drama series for 5 seasons on NBC, made guest appearances across numerous shows, Desperate Housewives Without a Trace, American Crime Story, and served as vice president of the Screen Actors Guild from 2002 to 2005. He partnered with producer Marvin Minoff on several films, including Patch Adams in 1998 with Robin Williams. Beyond his acting career, Farrell has been one of the most consistently politically and socially engaged members of the MASH cast over the decades. He was outspoken in the 1980s about U.S. involvement in Central America, advocated against discriminatory policies, and remained a public voice on causes he cared about long after his television work moved into quieter territory. He participated in the January 2024 Fox reunion special, the man who spent years convincing Hawkeye to feel something never quite stopped doing that himself. He turned 87 in February 2026, and he is still here. A final note: 11 people, 4 left. That's the arithmetic of MASH in 2026, and it hits differently when you think about it. About the show that ran for 11 years and outlasted the war it was satirizing. About the finale that 121 million Americans watched on a cold February night in 1983. About the fact that somewhere out there tonight, somebody is probably watching a rerun on cable and laughing at the same jokes they laughed at 40 years ago. The show premiered in 1972, which means the kids who watched it from the beginning with their parents are now in their 60s. The people who were in their 30s when it ended are in their 70s. MASH belongs to a generation that is, itself, now doing what this video is about. Checking the list, remembering who's still here, trying to hold on to something that shaped them before it's entirely out of reach. There's something specific about the way that show worked on the people who grew up with it. It wasn't just entertainment, it was a shared language, a set of characters so familiar they became reference points for real life. When someone behaved badly at work, they were being Frank Burns. When someone refused to stop making jokes in a tense situation, that was Hawkeye. When someone quietly, loyally showed up day after day without complaint, that was Radar. The 4077th gave a generation shorthand for the things they were seeing around them, and that shorthand doesn't go away just because the show ended. Alan Alda, Gary Berghoff, Jamie Farr, and Mike Farrell are still here. They've earned their years, each in their own way. The ones who are gone left something behind in those 251 episodes that doesn't age. Not Radar waving from the back of a Jeep as the whole camp watches him go. Not Hawkeye in the helicopter at the end, looking down at the word goodbye spelled out in rocks on a Korean hillside. Not Harry Morgan telling reporters that MASH made him a better human being. Not Loretta Sweet sitting in 2024 at a reunion table, surrounded by the people she'd spent 11 years growing up alongside on screen. The 4077th is still out there, in reruns and streaming libraries, and the memories of everyone who watched it. And for now, 4 of the people who made it what it was are still on this side of the line. That matters more than it might sound like it does. It really does. If you enjoyed taking this walk back through the 4077th, hit that like button and subscribe. We cover the shows, the stars, and the stories that meant something to the people who watched them. The cast of MASH gave over a decade of their lives to something that millions of people still carry with them, and that's worth remembering. There's a lot more where this came from. We'll see you in the next one.